Empire of Death is like so reliant on fans' knowledge of the past of the show that I genuinely think that as a finale, this story is like the death knell of new fans getting into Doctor Who. They've been told all season and in the marketing and all the promotion, and presumably fans have also been like reinforcing that and saying, oh no, you can watch this season, that, you know, it's a fresh start, it's a good jumping on point. And then in Empire of Death, they're midway through, they're watching a 49-year-old story on a monitor, and it requires homework. They stop the plot to explain what happened in the last story. Like, people have been saying to me, like, you know, oh, the audience didn't need, like, knowledge of the Daleks or the Cybermen and the Master. And, you know, that's partially true, but with the Daleks, they were already their own cultural institution that had been a pop culture presence and staple for the past 60 years. Even the Master appeared in The Curse of Fatal Death in the TV movie. You know, the Master, you know, it has a level of, like, mainstream, like, success and such. But there's a fundamental difference between, you know, Dalek having a returning villain, Utopia having a returning villain, and The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death being a full-on sequel to a 49-year-old story that the majority of people watching will not have seen. And for so much of the finale to take place in a memory TARDIS, a almost like literal safe space for fans, with a classic companion from the 80s, where they're curled up by a metaphorical campfire watching a 49-year-old story. And so much of the lead up to that finale as well is about the Doctor's granddaughter returning. Turn up, that was just another like hand wave away. Oh no, I in the TARDIS I learnt about your secrets, so I used Susan as a way to trap you in. But for some reason the Doctor needed to be trapped in. Why didn't Sutek just enact his plan like at any time? You know, not why is the God of Death like so obsessed with having a trap? Like, he could just like end creation in like a heartbeat with a snap of his fingers. Why does he need this? Like, in Pyramids of Mars, he's meant to be above all of those childish games. So yeah, there's so much like fan service and so many fan references and callbacks that I think that Empire of Death is like genuinely quite hostile to new viewers who have presumably been brought on board, especially regarding the Disney Plus distribution deal. International fans have very limited options to watch Pyramids of Mars. The Tales of the TARDIS re-edit was not broadcast or streamed internationally. There's no way to legally watch it if you're outside of the UK. The Tales of the TARDIS omnibus of Tales of Pyramids of Mars. It's very difficult to watch classic Doctor Who internationally. Like, you'd need like different subscription services, and it's quite difficult to do.
Wonderful.
At least it's more difficult than it should be. And then doing the whole marketing of this is a new era, new show, brand new international audience, and making the finale so reliant on a 49-year-old story. You could argue that the fans were served, but I'm known in my like friendship and circle group as the Doctor Who guy. Like, genuinely, Doctor Who is like one half of my normal job. Like, I file tax returns for this YouTube channel. Like, so I get a lot of people like messaging me their thoughts on the story. And when The Legend of Ruby Sunday was broadcast on BBC One, no joke, I was bombarded with text messages of people who were very confused. And people were saying, oh no, all the episode does is say that he's like the God of Death and he's a returning villain, and that's fine. No, Legend of Ruby Sunday ties in Sutek's reappearance with Susan, a character who has not been mentioned on screen by name since 1984 in Attack of the Cybermen. Or was it 1985? Either way, too. A long time ago, before most of the prospective audience has been even born. So it's priming the audience for a return to a character from like who's not been seen on screen since an anniversary special of dubious canonicity. And it ties in, it primes the audience so much for that. And then it brings back Sutek, a character from the 70s. So I had people asking, like, oh, was Susan involved with like the Sutek story from the past? Oh no, unrelated, different Doctor, different decade. Oh, are we meant to know who Sutek is? It's like, yeah, he's a villain from 50 years ago. Oh, well, right. They felt so alienated. Like, obviously I knew who Sutek was, but that's me. My job is Doctor Who man. And when it came to Empire of Death, so many people I knew, like, they felt so alienated by the way it presented the exposition, with them once again, literally, they're watching Pyramids of Mars in a memory TARDIS. They stop the story to watch a 49-year-old story. This is not how you appeal to new viewers. It just isn't. It's alienating. Like, it's fun fan service, but it's so alienating to the uninitiated. It makes them feel like they're watching something that's not meant for them, that's not welcoming to them. And that's even putting aside the whole mystery thing. I try and keep my ears to the ground in regards to what people are thinking about Doctor Who. I think a lot about, like, the reactionaries, conservatism and stuff, who gets outrage bait, whatever. They hated Empire of Death because it had a black man in it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your average Schmo Joe person. And, like, the consensus with Empire of Death was that it was a really bad finale, that didn't pay off the mysteries, that, in fact, utterly rejected the idea of paying off the mysteries satisfactorily. I was on a freelance job the other day, and I was walking past the camera crew. They were, like, I know they're big, like, sci-fi fans. One of them, like, lives and breathes Douglas Adams. And they were talking about the Doctor Who finale, and I was just, like, I was listening to them. And they were like, oh, it was so bad. It was really bad, wasn't it? Like, and I don't care about who Mrs. Flood is, because they just lied about Ruby's mum. Like, why should I get invested in about all of their mysteries if they're just going to lie, if they're just going to cheat the audience with it? And you go on Facebook, like, pages and Facebook stories and stuff, and, like, normally when, like, fans and reactionary stuff, like, you go into the comment section of, like, a news article talking about Doctor Who or teasing an interview and stuff like that, and, like, you see the reactionary backlash of, oh, Doctor Who's gone woke, or Black Doctor, Jews, and, you see all that stuff. I pay that no mind. But then you go to the news articles about Doctor Who, and you go in the comment section, and it's full of hundreds upon hundreds of comments, not copy-pasters, of viewers and commenters speaking with genuine accurate detail and real clarity on everything that went wrong here. Of why was it snowing? Why did Sutek care about the mum? Who's Mrs. Flood? I don't care, because they just lied about Ruby's mum, pointing at a sign even though the sign wasn't even there. Like, listing off genuine issues. I've never seen a Doctor Who finale do that before. I've been watching Doctor Who online discourse for about 15 years. I've never seen that happen. When it comes to Empire of Death, like, I'm genuinely worried that it's going to be like the ending of Game of Thrones, where it's like, we've not watched it, but the consensus around it being bad is so just accepted that it's not... The ending of Game of Thrones killed the show culturally for several years. It killed all discussion of Game of Thrones and merchandising and fan enthusiasm for years. Genuinely. It only came back with House of Dragon because of, like, a massive, like, change. And I'm kind of worried that that's what happened with Empire of Death now. Making a finale that's so reliant on fan service, on fan references, on, once again, a sequel to a 49-year-old story. And we're not at Game of Thrones Series 8 level right now, but I'm worried that it might be now. When I'm overhearing complete strangers at work actually talking about how bad the mystery was revealed, when I'm, like, going online and I'm seeing, once again, with genuine clarity, with specifics, not copy-pasters, not reactionary, woke, pithy responses, genuine clarity with the criticisms.
All of them.
I've never seen that happen before. Never seen it happen. You still have people act as if Ranscore is the worst finale ever made. Like, yeah, with like Ranscore, people were like, and once again, I'm not talking about, like, fan reaction. I'm talking about your average Joe Schmo off the street who is meant to be the main bread and butter for Doctor Who's audience figures. Like, not the 2 or 3 million people who will watch it guaranteed no matter what happens in the UK. What will happen as well when the hype cycle starts for Joy to the World and season 2, and Russell is going to be like, oh, you've got all these mysteries that are still yet to be revealed, and the discourse will pick back up again and be like, oh, oh, remember the last time we got invested in a mystery and it didn't pay off? And then people will be reminded that it didn't work, so they won't return to it, or they'll feel like, what's the point in getting into it and getting invested in it? This show desperately needs new blood. I think the fact that you based your finale of what's meant to be a fresh new start, a fresh new era of Doctor Who, and you made a sequel to a 49-year-old story and made it so reliant on the audience having some sort of knowledge of that, which I think is a pretty unfair bar for your average Joe Schmo audience member, personally. Russell, we owe Russell an awful lot in terms of bringing back Doctor Who in 2005, but my God, I'm convinced now more than ever that the show desperately needs new blood. I said this in my out of the theatre reaction for Empire of Death. The fact that he wanted so badly to centre his big triumphant return to Doctor Who in a new era of the show and make it a sequel to a 49-year-old story and tie in so much of the mystery to Susan as well, indicates that Russell seems to have resigned himself to the fact that Doctor Who's best days are behind it. And I think that's such a bad way to approach a show like this. You should be looking forward. You should be making brand new villains. Sutekh should have been a wholly original creation. He should have just been the god of death who, maybe once had the name Sutekh or something. I don't know. It could have been like that. But I think that with the best episodes in season 1 are the ones that weren't written by Russell. Boom and Rogue. Those were the best ones for me, at least. And I think that Russell might have lost the source a bit. I think he might have lost to the X Factor, really, with this, because it seems like the whole series is now like good vibes where there's no conflict. Ruby and the Doctor don't really have a single argument this season. There's no there's no scene like in Unquiet Dead where the Doctor and Rose butt heads with each other on moral principles. Ruby doesn't even really do anything that the Doctor couldn't in Empire of Death. Why did she have that screen with her mother's name supposedly on it when Sutekh can read minds? Sutekh can read minds. Why didn't he just read Ruby's mind to find out who the mother was? And why can a DNA set from 2046 know who Ruby's mother is, but the god of death who's omnipresent throughout all of time and space can't? Genuinely. How does this happen? The domestic drama stuff is really, really good in a vacuum. I like the theory and the read that Sutekh is a hyper-obsessed fan who's obsessed with the continuity and the past of the show and wanting to, demand answers to his mysteries, which is a really interesting theme. But once again, in a vacuum, it's not supported by the rest of the text. I acknowledge that I am biased when it comes to how Doctor Who is perceived by the general public, because once again, Doctor Who YouTuber is my job that I file taxes for. But also, I am the Doctor Who guy in my friend and family circle, who gets text and is bombarded with messages, people tell me what they thought of the episode and stuff And so when Empire of Death and Legend of Ruby Sunday broadcast, and I'm sent almost overwhelmingly negative responses to it, obviously that's a bias based on the people who are in my life and I interact with, but that's the only perspective I can really approach this from. And like I said, I was on set the other day and the camera operators were talking genuinely with actual examples and stuff what really didn't work about the finale. It's bad, folks. It's bad. It's really bad. And I genuinely do think, because with the Timeless Children, the main issue that people had with the Timeless Children, I think, was an ideological one, where they were upset about, the Doctor not being an everyman from Gallifrey, but rather being a prophesized immortal child who was the key to Gallifreyan society. And that's something that I can absolutely respect and get behind. But the problem is that, the Timeless Child at least makes sense within the story that it's telling. You can disagree with the story's ethos and its philosophy, and I'll listen to those criticisms, but it at least makes sense in its own bubble. But for Empire of Death, it doesn't even work within its own bubble. And that's the main death knell, I think, for it. It is it's definitely, by orders of magnitude, Russell T Davies's worst finale, and along with The Giggles, probably the worst thing he's written for the show. And like I said, that the main thing is just that, it's just reliant on Doctor Who's past to an alienating extent when it spent the past few months telling and insisting to audience members that they don't need to know anything about the past of the show to get on board with it, and then it betrays that trust and alienates them by making them stop the episode dead in its tracks to watch a 49-year-old story that about 90% of viewers, if we include an international audience worldwide with Disney Plus, will not only have never seen before, but likely won't even legally be able to watch. It's bad.
Wonderful, chap. All of them.
Do you think this finale was a so bad it's good story? No. Categorically no. Like I said, walking out of that theatre at 1 a.m., a 3/4 full big cinema screening full of Doctor Who fans, cosplayers, people who wanted to be there. I'm not talking about people like Bolstrek or Nerdrotic or Heroes vs. Babyface and stuff. They hate Doctor Who because they hate media. It wasn't that audience. They didn't pay to see Doctor Who. They don't care. It wasn't that audience. It was people who wanted to be there because they love Doctor Who and they wanted to be at an event. And walking out of that screening was like walking out of a fucking wake. It was bad vibes, everyone.